The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello there, welcome to the show. This show is brought to you by Levi Solicitors, who will offer you a 10% discount on your legal fees at levisolicitors.co.uk/the square ball. It's Dan and Michael here in the studio. You're embarrassed, aren't you, because you've got guests on the line? You don't want to do a full silly Will's Probate Conveyancing.
Will's Probate Conveyancing, fine. That's what they do. The solicitors, people know.
Yeah, you can find that on their website and go via us for that discount. Yeah, 10% discount on your legal fees. levisolicitors.co.uk/the square ball. Into it then, or rather out of it, because we're going to step outside our own daft Leeds United echo chamber, our silly little world that we've created, Michael, and find out what the outside world thinks of Leeds United. On the line today, you'll find Ali Maxwell, hello, from Not the Top 20 podcast. Hello, stranger. Welcome.
Hello, friends. Let's go with that. I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest, because far be it from me to take away from like the actual thrust of your incredible Leeds United coverage. Like, actually, probably the sponsored bits at the start is probably my personal favourite bit of TSB. So for you to sack it off like that and sort of use me as a reason why is disappointing. But no, really nice to join you guys. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Do you want to give Not the Top 20 a quick plug? Tell us about it. Anybody who's not familiar with what it is that you do, what will they find there?
Yeah, I will do that. We are the #1 EFL podcast. We've been going for about 8 years. We started because we didn't feel like the EFL was given any sort of thoughtful, insightful coverage, and that we felt there was quite a big audience of EFL fans who would appreciate that. So that's been our mission statement. We're going well on the pod 8 years in, and we've got some big episodes coming up with our 1 to 24 league predictions. But on NTT20.com, that's our written site. That's kind of the big new thing for us over the last year or so. And this summer, we are covering every single transfer that gets completed in the EFL on NTT20.com, which has been quite a big undertaking. I think there's been over 400 so far. But again, it's just this idea that outside of BBC Sports transfer page, where you get the name of the player and the clubs between which they've moved, you don't really get any insight or any detailed, thoughtful knowledge. So that's what we're trying to do for fans of EFL clubs, give them a bit of background on the players they're signing, what they're like as a player, and also as a bonus, you get to see what your rivals are up to as well.
Cards on the table then. You're disappointed with our start to the podcast. We're disappointed to be speaking to you, truthfully, because we didn't get promoted, which means we're still in the EFL. So should we start there then? Playoff final. We've both listened to your playoff final episode in the build-up to this. Retreading ground, I don't think we wanted to necessarily go on, no.
I just more or less nodded along to it, though. Was hearing it and going, yeah, Pirro's rubbish, yeah, they were better. Yeah, we could have nicked it, but fine, didn't deserve it.
What did you make of the playoff final, and what did you make of the closeout to last season, and Leeds' season as a whole, I suppose?
Yeah, it's interesting because I haven't listened back to our Championship playoff final review, but I did get a few messages from people, Leeds fans and otherwise, who said they felt that I was unusually passionate and quite critical of Leeds United. And I think part of my response was, well, look, most of our podcasts we record on a Monday, well after the games on a Saturday, so they're not sort of on the whistle. And we'd been at Wembley and we'd been sitting with quite a lot of Leeds fans actually, and I guess it was probably more of that sort of adrenaline emotional response because we recorded straight after the game. So, I was really disappointed with what that Leeds team put out on the pitch that day. Outside of a good first, was it 5 minutes probably from what I remember, and a flurry at the end, which was just sort of pretty standard stuff rather than anything particularly impressive. I felt let down as a neutral, so I can imagine how it would have felt as a fan. And, the reason why people would have said they were surprised I was that critical is because that shouldn't take away from the fact that Leeds United were an excellent team last season for almost all of the campaign, right? Other than the top and tail of it. And in any other season, that team playing that kind of football and winning games at that rate would have won automatic promotion. There would have been no nitpicking about individual performances in big games. It would have just been a team that picked up 90 points and won automatic promotion. So I'm still feeling a little conflicted about Leeds last season, in that I thought you were a great team that would have gone up in any other season, really sturdy and consistent for almost all of that season, apart from the first month and the last month. It's just while you can probably explain away the issues in August, the stuff in April and May and in that playoff final is still kind of lingering for me, and it gives me some cause for concern ahead of next season.
One of the things you identified in that episode was the failure of Leeds to press properly from the front. Like, as you said, it started quite well in the first sort of 5-10 minutes. Because I remember thinking, Michael, and I think we spoke about it at the time, actually, we've turned up here. Mm-hmm. My big fear that we just would not turn up, and it'd be very Leedsy in the final. Because teams sometimes do just melt away on the big stage, don't they, when it's all on the line like that. But for that first 10 minutes, I got the sense that actually we're in this and it's going to be potentially quite a tight game. But they just went and scored after about 20, and then that was the end of that. And
we just never, for all the good play we had, we just didn't create chances either. That was the other thing. There were moments where we had, well, there was a lot of the game we had the majority of the possession, I would say. But it was a bit Southgate's England at times, wasn't it? It was a bit just pass. Never anything actually getting going as you get towards the box. And I think that was part of the issue last season, wasn't it? Particularly towards the end. It felt like it broke down a little bit when in the games where Somerville or Georgie or Nonto didn't produce something, it felt like we were just playing keep ball for long periods. And I think we saw the worst of that in the playoff final. What
do you think of the forward line, Ali? Because one of the things you picked out in that episode was the lack of successful pressing. It's not that they weren't trying to do it, but like Pirou ended up front, which is in contrast to what Leeds did at the start of the season, which was Pirou sitting deeper and Georgie playing further forward. Pirou can't really press from the front. It didn't really work in the wide areas either. And if you look back to that Southampton goal, it was back to front in about 5 passes, just cutting through the lines. And it started, you said on that episode, with Leeds' failure to get it right from the front.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not a lack of effort. And I think that's important because it's definitely, a lack of effort is something that is completely unacceptable. A lack of quality in a press is, it's difficult. Southampton are probably were the joint best team in the league when it came to playing loads of really short passes in their back line in order to force a pass through when the gap appeared. And they did that better than most other teams. So it's not easy, but it is an issue. And what you say is right. You've got some really good players, good individual players who won Leeds a lot of football matches where the foundation of the team was set with a brilliant defence and a really solid sort of midfield double pivot. And then it felt like the games were won by mostly the individual players at the top of the pitch rather than a really well-coached attacking team. And I think there is a difference there. And that feels risky to me because you are then dependent on Somerville and Nonto to provide those moments of quality. So, I mean, Rute I love, but he's so difficult to watch when he's not on his game. So I just think you need the number 9 to have a different profile to Pirou and probably to Bamford and probably to Joseph as well. And if we talk about Leeds transfer business, the thing I'm most disappointed in so far is I want to see Leeds like really impact the market. I don't know the details of this new ownership group, but they seem like they should be able to, allow Leeds to flex some muscles at this level in the transfer market. And I know Rodon's come in for a decent fee and Bogle as well, but I want to see a number 9 bought and not a sort of development number 9 or not a punt. I want to see Leeds buy like the best number 9 that they could feasibly buy. I'm not saying Kiefer Moore is that guy, but there's a part of me that thinks, would that have been the worst thing in the world? I don't know. I just think before we even get into how many of those attacking players are going to stay, because you guys will know better than me whether Rute, Somerville, Nonto have concrete interests and are likely to leave. But I'm just worried about the top of the pitch at the moment because it seems very uncertain. And all of the worst aspects of it were shown on the pitch at Wembley, where out of possession, the press didn't work a few times to terrible effect. And in possession, I didn't see like joined up thinking. I didn't see crosses coming in with obvious targets in the middle or with good movement in the middle. We didn't see any goals from midfield for the whole season. It just makes it a bit easier to defend against, I think. that was my main thoughts.
Matteo Joseph has come back looking buff and scored twice in pre-season, and I think we immediately penciled him in for 40 goals this coming season. So not that we're pinning everything on him.
Yeah, I was going to say noise coming from inside the club as well. They've been talking him up, so I think they feel internally like he's stepped up a level this summer. But,
or like they can't afford to buy anyone else.
Or they can't afford to buy anybody else. Yeah,
so they're talking him up. But I mean, when we saw bits of him, there was quite a clamour for him to get in the team towards the end of last season when we were having that wobble towards the end going into the playoffs, because it felt like with Pirro and Rutter as the two, neither of them particularly occupy centre-backs in the box, do they? They both seem more comfortable doing build-up stuff or having shots from outside, in erratic shots in Rutter's case, generally speaking. Whereas as soon as Joseph comes on, he's just someone who will annoy a centre-back and hassle them, and he'll be attacking the 6-yard box. And it felt like we missed that for large periods, where Bamford either isn't playing or isn't fit, or is playing and is fit but still can't finish.
Yeah, well,
a combination of all those frustrations.
Yeah, you mentioned actually in the playoff final episode, you said you didn't think necessarily that Leeds would have won, but you thought it would have been a different game if Bamford had played, because you get that running out of him that you don't get out of Pirro, and it might have been that the press was executed differently. And you also identified that when Joseph came on, you got a little bit of that later on. I think they probably see him as the long-term successor to Bamford. And the fact that, as we've been saying on recent episodes, he's come back looking, I think hench is the word, isn't it? He's come back looking like he's really bulked out. And we saw one of the pre-season games last week when Leeds played Hannover 96 in Germany. And in one of the goals, it was a goal that Joseph scored actually and took really, really well. One of the defenders just bounced off him. Like he just tried to barge him, and he bounced off Joseph in a very literal sense. So I think I can see where they're angling with this one. The other side to this is Bamford's still got, is it 2 years left on his contract? And it'll be a big contract.
Yeah, it was signed after his 17 Premier League goals, and it was 5 years. So we are, to say stuck with would be maybe a bit harsh, but no one's taking him off our hands. Someone who's that injured on that kind of a money you wouldn't imagine. So he'll be there.
And Pirro. Look, I'm just not a very big fan of Pirro as a Leeds player. I enjoyed watching him for Swansea, but when he signed, I didn't feel that he was the right level as an all-rounder to be a key player for a team at the very top of the Championship. And I certainly haven't changed that opinion based on last season. And there's the fit issue with the other players around him. So, but that's going to be, you're not going to sell Pirro this summer either. So. Yeah, it's a bit uncertain up there. I'm very encouraged to hear that about Joseph. I mean, I was excited by him, and as you say, I wanted to see more of him. I suppose, for a lot of clubs in the EFL, if they have or had a player like him who everyone was really excited about, I do encourage that you allow them a pathway into the first team. And if he really is one of the best under 21 strikers in Europe, as I've seen people call him, who've watched him for Spain unders and for Leeds' youth team, then that's fantastic. But it is risky. Of course it's risky. His data when it comes to pressing and when it comes to inside the box poaching instincts is very good, but it comes from 4 games worth of minutes last season. So for someone to be able to cope with being Leeds' starting number 9 for a 46-game season from that starting point, it worries me a bit. It's a lot to ask. But having said that, I'm very excited to see him in August because it sounds like he's ready to go.
I do hope Pirro steps up a little bit this year with a year under his belt, understanding the football. I agree he's not a perfect fit for the Leeds forward line. But then again, we've done that quite a lot in recent years, even signing like Rodrigo, for example. Never had the sort of physicality, not the physicality, but the athleticism to do like the Bielsa pressing, for example. It felt like a Victor Orta did that one when we were in the Premier League. I
wouldn't be entirely surprised if Pirro is more of a bench option this year. If Joseph gets in and gets established, I'm not completely sure where Pirro fits in as a starter, but I think he'll probably have an all right impact from the bench, and then I wouldn't be surprised, up or down, we sell him next year. Up, I think we would certainly sell him. And if we stay down, maybe see.
Where are you guys at the moment with Somerville, Gnonto, Rutter being Leeds players?
Yeah, I think Georgie stays. Rutter he'll stay.
Yeah, there's not an awful lot of noise around him going.
Just because of the size of the fee. I mean, to view it in sort of cold, hard PSR terms, there's not a lot of money to be made there. Whereas Crescencio Somerville, there's probably about 35, 40 million quid's worth of profit there, which is, it's the glamorous, exciting side of the EFL, isn't it? You've got to crystallise PSR profit. But yeah, I mean, Gnonto clearly would rather not be in the EFL. That was made clear, 12 months ago when he tried to get out. I think Somerville has in his mind a top 6 move, something like that, and maybe biding his time. I think we saw the sale of Archie Gray possibly because they couldn't offload Somerville before the end of June. I think our gut feeling, do you agree, is probably that we lose one of them. Wouldn't be a surprise. Both might be a bit of a surprise, but not a total surprise. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the club if we've covered the kind of obligations PSR wise with Archie Gray, the noise is coming from the club, which obviously you're going to say because you're never going to say, oh shit, we're in a panic here, we need to sell someone. But the noise is coming from the club are that they will wait for an offer they consider acceptable for both of them. And we did hold our nerve on Nonto last year because obviously most of the players who left last year had these loan clauses and they were able to escape. Whereas with Nonto, he was very much held to it. And I suspect they'll do the same. If they were turning down 20 million last year, I guess they might do it again. Yeah. Although I don't think Nonto's value necessarily rose at all last season. He finished the season, or if kind of Christmas onwards, he was all right, wasn't he? But certainly the early part of the season, it felt like his value was actually dropping, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested to pick up on one of the words that you did use in the post-playoff final episodes, and it's something I think we, as you've touched on there, Michael, actually, we identified, or one of the criticisms that came out of the Leeds fan base anyway, was the word predictable. You used the word predictable. And you said that we set up differently to some of the other promoted teams in the sense that you pretty much knew what Leeds United were going to do. And it's something you've actually mentioned already on this episode, Ali. It's pass it around in recognisable patterns, give it to one of the talented players who can dribble with it and make something happen. Was that Leeds United's downfall, you think, last season, maybe being too predictable? And what can we do, in your opinion, as a neutral, to address that this season and perhaps add another dimension to what it is that we do?
Yeah, I really battle with this because it's got to be pointed out that you won so many games and picked up so many points. Like, it was a really good team. So whatever the case was, it worked really well for 90% of the season. So we are just trying to find that extra 10%. But I started thinking it a month before the end of the season. And from that point, it became so obvious to me that particularly in tight games or when Leeds went behind, which they started doing more than they had previously, the lack of ideas and how predictable the attack was going to be was an issue, clearly. Now, like you could say that Southampton and Leicester played in a pretty predictable way as well. So again, we're talking about basically like kind of plan B stuff. How do you chase a game? How do you win a tight game? But there's so much that needs improving from a Leeds point of view. I'm a bit worried that Farke, just in terms of how he coaches and how he sets up his team and how he thinks about football, either won't think this is a big issue or won't necessarily have the coaching quality to have a really good plan B, because some of his responses to you guys being behind in the last few weeks of the season were just to chuck on as many or just more wingers, more strikers, more attacking midfielders, quite often for fullbacks or central midfielders. And particularly that Blackburn game, the shape went completely because there's a reason that teams don't play with 6 forward players and 2 defenders and 2 midfielders. And albeit it was a massive smash and grab, does the fact that Blackburn took a long goal kick, their striker won a header, the ball fell in that middle part of the pitch, and then Leeds looked really confused about who was meant to be tracking who, that led to a Blackburn goal. That didn't surprise me at all because of the subs that Farke had made. So I'm pretty worried about that on that front. I feel like I'm being really negative, and I don't really mean to be. The positive for me is the signing of Joe Rothwell. I really think that him as a player should help improve this situation. That's because in terms of someone who's going to play deeper than that front four, who can actually have an impact in the final third, in particular, is an exceptional dribbler in tight spaces in the centre of the park. Really rare skill set for a central midfielder in the Championship. He's been one of the best at it for a number of years. And I think that is going to make a massive difference to how Leeds look in all different aspects of the game, but particularly when you're having to break down a low block and you've funneled it out wide and there's no space for Somerville. You've funneled it out wide the other way and there's no space for Nonto. Just having him and the threat of Ruter as well, which is very good in that space, is going to be huge. So for me, that's a really significant addition that you've made, just to add something that you didn't have already. And I do think that will make a big difference in terms of Leeds looking a bit better in those against those deep defences. And
for all he's been subject to criticism, Brendan Aronson can dribble as well and carry it through the lines. That was the problem, wasn't it? It was breaking the lines. Two things I think I've picked up on in pre-season, and we've chatted about them on our recent shows, Michael. Have you spotted quicker passing in obviously it's a limited data set, but in the friendly against Hanover, we saw, I think, a lot of really quick interchange passes to try and break the lines, which kind of runs counter to what we saw last season, which was a very pedestrian style of play at times. Knock it around, probe, put it into midfield, send it back. People checking their watches, looking at their phones, that kind of thing. It looked a lot more zippy. I mean, they might start the season like that, but these things sometimes can be worn down, can't they, over the course of a season?
I think some of it's a personnel issue, because the midfielders last year, I think, were all very good. If you look at individually, I'd say Kamara, Gruev and Ampadu, when they all played in those double pivot roles, they were all actually very good. But there was no, like, to fall back on previous Leeds teams, there was no Mateus Click in there, there was no Pablo Hernandez in there, someone who would drop deep and then actually move the ball forward. And you probably know more about Rothwell than we do, truthfully, but if he can provide a bit of that, I think that is vital, and I think that will completely start to pull teams out of shape a bit, because really it took until the second leg of the playoffs for a central midfielder to score a goal when Gruev scored that free kick, and truthfully, I don't think any of them ever looked close, did they?
No.
From midfield. No. Like Kamara, point blank refused to shoot. Gruev, equally, I don't think he had many chances either. So if we can get even another 8 goals from central midfield, I think would make a big difference for us as well.
It always felt to me like there's a bit of a gap between the midfielders and the attack. Yeah,
it felt like there was a very solid base, and then there were some very good attacking players, and there was not necessarily a link between them. And working the ball from the defensive unit to the attacking unit, when you've got very good forward players, it works half the time. Yeah. It's just that, as you say, structurally, when you need to make changes, you just end up chucking more and more attacking players on.
I actually think is another positive point. I think Bogle's a great addition, and specifically for what we're talking about, I think he will really help Leeds be a better attacking team. And to what we're talking about, where it sometimes felt like it was just defensive midfield, gap, 4 attackers, see what you can do, lads. He will join the front line, and most teams these days attack with a front 5 in possession, and I think he's a really attacking wing back, basically. So while Gray was an absolute phenom, like one of the best young players I've ever seen at his age, and had one of the most outstanding seasons I've ever covered, I do think if we're just objectively comparing him and Bogle, I do think what Bogle will offer just in the final 20 meters will probably be, he'll probably have better attacking output than Gray did in those parts of the game. Now, what he won't do is be as good on the ball in deeper areas. So, you're not upgrading in every sense, but I think just truly, if Leeds are going to be able to get the ball into the final third quite regularly, I think Bogle's presence will be a massive help. Now, who will be playing on the right, in front of him will be quite important as well, because if you think of it from sort of left to right, you've got Firpo, who loves to bomb on down the left side, Somerville, who likes that because it means he can get on the ball in the kind of in between spaces inside, Ruter and the number 9, and then if Bogle's also holding a lot of width on the right hand side, traditionally these days you'd want a left-footed inside forward, basically like an inverted winger, and I can't think of anyone that fits that bill. Nonto's pretty good on his left, but he's not naturally a left-footed player. So I wonder if that could be something on the recruitment team's in tray, is sort of left-footed, a Morgan Whittaker or a Josh Bowler. I'm not necessarily saying Bowler is good enough to play for Leeds, but that sort of player at Championship level who provides that left-footed threat off the right, I think that would complement Bogle well.
Yeah, there's Dan James, of course, as well, who, while he doesn't do the inverted cut-in and drive towards goal, he is very good at getting to the byline and just beating people with his raw pace. It's one thing he's particularly good at. The other thing I was going to say in relation to what we might see that's different this season is that we've seen some tentative experiments with 3 at the back. So we wonder if that is maybe the plan B rather than the chuck everything at the wall and see what sticks approach, is something more structured, which will allow Firpo or left back to bomb on, Bogle bombs on, joins the attack, keeps that solid base at the back, and just allows everything to move that little bit further forward in terms of trying to break teams down.
Because 3 at the back with your midfielders, Gruev, Kamara, and Ampadu would have almost been 6 at the back.
Yeah,
to a large extent, because they're all quite defensive players, aren't they? So I guess if you look to have more progressive players in midfield, it allows you to maybe do that a bit more.
Yeah, you can maybe sit one in front of the 3, couldn't you? Then and just have everybody else going forward.
Yeah, for sure. I guess off the top of my head, you're looking at Bogle and Firpo wing backs, a back 3 of Rodon, Ampadu, and Strauch.
We've got Max Verber has come back as well.
Yeah.
He seems to be part of the squad. It wouldn't be entirely surprising if he left, because he was quite keen to get out last year. But I mean,
it'd be good.
Aside from the dislike of him from that, I think he's probably quite decent for the Championship.
Yeah,
I think if you had that base, then it would be fine to play Rothwell in midfield with Gruev. Gruev's basically going to hold his position and be that sort of single pivot in front of the back 3. And then Rothwell can do some roaming, which is what you want him to be doing. And then you could still have, I mean, Ruter would have to be the 9, but he's obviously pretty fluid. And Somerville and Nonto or James, I guess, kind of wide forwards, but roaming all over, which in Somerville's case is probably what you want. So instinctively, when you said 3 at the back, I kind of turned my nose up, because I don't think of Farke as playing that sort of system. But actually, I can kind of see the logic.
I can see Ruter potentially, if Somerville and or Nonto went as well, I could see Ruter potentially playing wide sometimes as well, because he kind of does what he wants, doesn't he? Largely speaking, some of the stuff he does is quite unusual, but I think he could operate from either side, cutting in actually.
Yeah.
So that'd be another option. I feel like if I was to pick a position, I'd still probably like. It's maybe just because of an obsession with past players, but I'd like a Pablo Hernandez type. It would be my top of my wish list if we could have anything. Somebody
who can play a bit narrower, who's essentially there to link up midfield and attack,
and and unlock defences with amazing passes, and also contribute sort of 8 to 10 goals.
Yeah,
as well.
Is that all?
That's all, and just be like one of the best players we've had in the last 20 years. Yeah.
I was going to say, if you could just buy like one of the most iconic Leeds players ever, that'd be good, wouldn't it? I mean, it feels again. You guys know more about what's realistic here, but like just compared to other squads and looking at the pure numbers and the breakdown by position, like if you take out the 3 keepers, you've got, according to Transfermarkt, you've got 19 outfield players, which one is Gelhard, one is Aronson. So I wasn't really sure how to sort of treat those players, but like. It would be normal for a team of Leeds' stature in the Championship to have like quite a few more outfield players as part of the squad. It might be a targeted thing about having a small squad and that being better for consistency or whatnot. But like, I would expect quite a lot more business to be done if I was running Leeds' transfer team, which obviously I'm not. So I don't know. It kind of always all feels a bit quiet.
Yeah, it is worth timestamping this and saying we're recording this at lunchtime on Friday and it's coming out after the weekend, so things may have moved in the intervening period. But yeah, it does feel like we're not quite there yet. I know that in the interviews post-friendly this week, Farke was saying there is business still to be done, isn't it? He wanted more cover at full-back and another central midfielder, but you wonder, is there another sacrificial lamb potentially in the pipeline, be it Somerville, Nonto, and they look to maybe do another couple, maybe 3 or something like that off the proceeds of that one.
Yeah, it's something we talked about quite a bit last season, and that if we don't go up, we can see that this year we might end up with a squad with a lower ceiling and maybe not overall as talented, but better balanced and more capable of just winning the division. Because it did. We came into the Championship last year off the back of a couple of disastrous years in terms of recruitment and the contract situation with loads of them being able to leave, and it was quite shambolic. And if you look at our best performers last year, Somerville was at the club, but not really playing. So none of our best performers last year were actually established first team members, were they? It was Rodon, it was Ampadu, it was Gray, it was Somerville, and it was a complete new squad, which I know Leicester and Southampton both lost key players, but I don't feel like they maybe had to quite reinvent the wheel as much as us.
Yeah, and like Ipswich had momentum.
Yeah,
that was crucial to their success, I think. I mean, I was actually going to say that, Ali, and just lead into another question of how do you think the 3 promoted clubs will get on in the Premier League this coming year?
don't know. I'm so EFL focused that I always find this difficult when teams go up. You've covered them winning so many games and all the way to glory. You kind of, I guess momentum's the word. You sort of hope that they can carry that into the Premier League, and you want to tell the Prem fans that, you know, you might look down at these teams, but they're actually pretty good. Like, you know, I've seen them for the last 12 months. And obviously last season that was a disaster because all three came straight back down. I think that's a bit of an outlier. It might, you know, people use it as the sort of, it's become a fact that the Premier League and the Championship are just miles apart, and that's the sort of way of symbolising that. I think there's a chance it was just a bit of an aberration of a season. You know, actually Leeds, Saints and Leicester, those three teams shouldn't have gone down from the Premier League, really, or not all three of them in a normal season. So I think it's just kind of, I think the season will look quite different, put it that way. I'm excited to see Ipswich because they might concede 100 goals. They might score quite a lot of goals and play some quite fun football. But I'm not that up for Leicester, to be honest. I think like all the stuff surrounding them, the points deductions, etc., the change of manager, I think I like Steve Cooper as a manager. I can't see him like raising the ceiling of that team a huge amount, and that is something of a concern. They've obviously lost Dewsbury Hall as well. And as for Saints, you know, I'm a bit worried about them being a bit soft, put it that way. So I guess I hadn't actually thought about it at all, to be honest, guys, but I'm not feeling that confident about those three.
I mean, we don't think about the Premier League chumps either, to be honest, Ali. We're all EFL here, aren't we? All in. Yeah.
Do you know, I was thinking, listening back to the playoff episode, I was thinking to myself, I'm not actually sad to be starting the season in the Championship. It's fine. Like, if we'd have been starting in the Premier League, I'd be probably more worried than I am now. But actually,
really sad to lose Archie Gray, we should say.
Yeah,
because that's been the price of staying down so far.
Yeah.
However, on a sort of in a wider sense.
But there's a bit of me looks at the fixtures and go, oh, we can probably win most of these games, and it'll actually be fun to watch. Whereas Premier League, you look at the fixtures and go, I don't know, we might win 9.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the thing that you sort of touched on there, Ali. I think the gap between the top end of the Championship and the bottom of the Premier League is not that great. It's the gap to the middle of the Premier League that's huge and almost impossible to cover that gap, I think, at times, without a huge amount of money behind you.
At the other end of things...
Or cheating.
Or cheating. The teams that are coming up, what do you make of them? Because I'll be honest, I know nothing about them.
From
League
One to the Champ? Yeah, okay. So...
we start with Portsmouth, actually, on the opening day, don't we?
We do.
Yeah, Portsmouth, I mean, historically, like easily a second-tier club, aren't they? So you always feel confident that as a club and as a fan base, they're going to come up sort of ready and not willing to just be underdogs, which a lot of promoted teams kind of instantly get branded with. They were a really impressively sturdy team last season. I massively overuse the trope of saying a team has a high floor or a high ceiling or variations of that. And in that sense, Portsmouth had a really high floor. And what that means, what I think that means is they're really consistent. They were never second best by miles. They rarely conceded more than a goal in a game, really strong defensively, really, you know, able to stay in games. And they probably weren't the flashiest team in League One last season, but they didn't need to be. They just accumulated points really consistently and had a great character. I don't necessarily know how that translates to the Championship. I expect them to be, there certainly won't be pushovers, but I don't know if they'll have as much quality going forward to accrue a lot of points. So I think they might struggle. I think Oxford will probably struggle. They weren't a hugely strong League One team last season anyway, until the last month or so. So, you know, you're kind of banking on that last month suddenly being their real selves all season. And who came up with
Derby?
Derby.
Our old friends, playoff friends.
Yeah. They've done some quite interesting transfer business to try and sort of add a bit more athleticism. That they're going to play a really direct style. Paul Warne's style of football, I think some people might suggest it has a bit of a ceiling at Championship level, where actually the level of managers is really high. The level of like tactical detail is pretty high now across the board almost. And someone like Warne, who builds amazing teams, who is super fit, who are really intense out of possession and play good, quick, direct football, you know, he'll have a better team than he ever had at Rotherham, but I still worry a little bit for them just in terms of being able to trouble teams like yourselves and other teams at this level. So, I mean, this is the big positive for Leeds United. We focus so much about your team, but it's worth, the context of the league as a whole is just as important. Which, as we said, Leeds were a great team last season and won loads of points and would have gone up in almost any other championship season. So it was the context of your rivals that was actually probably the biggest issue, rather than Farke not having a plan B. So this season, I do think it will be much easier for Leeds or any team to make the automatics promotion spots, because I don't see the top of the division being, setting quite as quick a pace. I don't think the teams coming down are anything to be terrified of. I don't know whether you guys have spoken about that, but I don't imagine you're shaking in your boots when it comes to Burnley or Blades or Luton. It's not to say that one or two or three of those won't put together a good season, but I do think if Leeds can broadly keep the same consistency defensively and out of possession, and just that consistency that you had for most of the season, then you're still going to be there or thereabouts. I've absolutely no doubt about that.
It doesn't feel like as difficult a season coming up, and I want to choose my words carefully there, because you can get egg on your face for these things very, very easily, can't you? But essentially, like last season, we just weren't able to put a foot wrong for the whole season, and you can't go through a 46-game season and not put a foot wrong at some point. It felt fairly, not like a one-off, but a difficult season to have a wobble at either end, and everybody had a wobble. I mean, like Ipswich didn't win for 9 games and still went up second, so it goes to show that it can be done. But yeah, it feels, easier is not the right word, but it feels less challenging than last season ended up, I suppose. Well,
and in Southampton and Leicester as well, we faced 2 teams there who were very, very well established in the Premier League, whereas Burnley, Luton and Sheffield United have, well, in some cases bounced up and down, in some cases, in Luton's case, been EFL for a very long time. So it doesn't feel like they've had quite the same infrastructure and the same build-up of good players that you do get from being in the Premier League, unless you're us and Victor Orta's in charge. But there's not. I don't feel there's quite as much depth, and in like Burnley's case, they're dealing with a new manager as well.
That's it's the depth. Yeah,
it's not knowing entirely how that's going to work. It's weird because Scott Parker's actually got a very good record in the Championship, but I think I seem to remember at one point he was linked with us, and everyone was like, "Nah, not Scott Parker." I don't know why. I don't know why there's a snobbery around him, but I've gone straight back to it with him going to Burnley and just thought, yeah, he's not going to do very well there. It's too northern for him, apart from anything else.
I think he might. Let me again choose my words carefully here, because Farke has an unbelievable record at Championship level, as does Parker. But Parker and Farke. I think I would have similar concerns with both of them, which is what they're doing on a tactical or a coaching level making the team better than just the sum of its parts. So that's my general concern about Farke. He had some incredible players at Norwich, and they played incredible football, and they won, and he deserves tons of credit for that. He deserves tons of credit for walking into Leeds with quite a lot of uncertainty and pulling everyone together. I think he is an excellent manager in kind of the old school sense, kind of keeping everyone together, staying pretty calm, never seems too fazed by stuff. That's an important part of a Leeds manager's temperament. But I think with Parker as well, it's like he's done basically what the teams that he's taken up have had the best squad in the league. So he's taken them up. That's the objective, and he's done it. Credit, sure. But then has he ever done anything more than you'd expect? After promotion, certainly not. And so that's where I'm a little concerned for Burnley, where they have all these exotic names. They have a squad that's been put together in the most bizarre way over the last 2 years, mostly by Vincent Kompany and his recruitment assistant, whose name evades me. So many from outside of the UK, which, as we know, you can get some quality players from outside the UK. You probably get better value for money as well. But just in terms of Parker as a fit for a team of, half of them are, they're young. They've come from overseas, and I'm just a little concerned that he might not be the right person for that. So, yeah, Parker and Farke, I've got sort of, really nitpicking here. I want to make sure there's respect in my voice, but broadly, do they make a team significantly better than you would otherwise expect them to be?
That's it's the reality of being where you are, isn't it? In the Championship, it's just the bare.
My instinct is that
it.
I feel like Luton will be the strongest of the teams to come down, just because it feels like not a great deal has had to change there.
Yeah,
and
there's cohesion, isn't there?
And they were kind of all right last year in the Premier. They never really looked like staying up, but equally they didn't ever seem to throw the towel in the same way as Sheffield United did, because there were games where you watched them and they were, 3 down within half an hour or whatever, and you just thought that there's no plan here. And Wilder...
Dan, can I jump in? Sorry, you said that's kind of the reality of where we are, and I might be misunderstanding what you're saying, but Bielsa's the opposite of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, true enough.
Bielsa is the reason that Leeds were incredible.
But that was, I think,
90% of that was him. Kieran McKenna.
Yeah.
Like, you can hire managers that make your team better than the sum of their parts. That's, for me, that's what represents a great manager.
Yeah, I think I meant more generally, truthfully. Like Bielsa was a complete moonshot that somehow we managed to pull off. And as much as Victor Orta rightly takes criticism for a lot of things, doing that and getting Bielsa for me is just a remarkable achievement. And what they set about doing is unbelievable. And you're right about Kieran McKenna, but that's without the track record of having done it. And even Maresca last year came without track record. So there are certain compromises you've got to make, I suppose, in a very general sense is what I meant, is that you're either going for people who are proven at this level but maybe haven't made it at the higher level, or somebody who is establishing a record as they go. Yeah.
Or you can hire Gandalf in Marcelo Bielsa for reasons that no one can really understand, but it's just wonderful.
Gandalf is it's a perfect way to put it, because there's no way we should have got him on reflection. None.
No, any other manager with his reputation wouldn't look at a job in the second tier.
Yeah, but then people don't understand necessarily what he's like until he comes to your club and you get to know him, because we're never going to get over him, ever. And I'm surprised it's taken us this long to mention him, to be honest. Because I think about him every day.
Just get Pablo and Bielsa back and let's go again.
just run the clock back. I was going to say, Ali, so we are runaway favourites in terms of the odds for the division at Leeds. Burnley actually second favourites. So at decimal odds, I mean, just to put it into simple terms, you put £1 on Leeds to win this, you're going to get £4.50 back, including your stake. Burnley, do the same, it'll be £9. So Leeds considered twice as likely as Burnley to win this. Then Luton at like 13, Middlesbrough 15. Then you're into relatively longish odds, but a lot of clubs around that kind of middle. This is outright winner as well. This is not just promotion. So Leeds really are nailed on favourites. And I know Leeds are probably attracting a lot of money, so the market's reflecting that. But what do you make of that? Is that right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, so my podcast partner, George, is an absolute expert on all things betting odds. I mean, from what I know, those odds exist partly because I've got through the whole pod without talking about underlying data. That is rare. But that's because Leeds' underlying data, their XG ratio or their XG goal difference, pretty much anything that you want to find outside of just pure results, suggested that Leeds were the best team in the league last year. And that is what bookmakers use now to set their prices. They lean so heavily on the performance data, the deeper stuff, and they broadly ignore the actual results. And that's why Leeds are going to be favourites here, because those who are rating teams in this way will say, I don't care if they didn't play well in the playoffs. I don't even care about a bad last month of the season. This was the best team in the championship and they're still there. And the 2 or 3 other good teams that were also up there with them in the same ballpark have gone. And they will, I don't know how they're rating the Premier League teams because I'm not so hot on my Premier League underlying numbers, but I think that they will say huge uncertainty around Burnley. They've got about 40 senior players on their books and a new manager that I doubt the models rate that highly. Luton, they're not going to have a squad on paper that is considered or rated by these data nerds as a super strong squad. So that's how I explain it. It's so heavily done on performance data, and Leeds' was amazing. So there will be people with no skin in the game who don't have the emotional tie to Leeds United who will say bullishly, they're the best team. They're the best team over 46 games, and they're the worthy favourites. And that's the reason why. And also because you haven't changed, they'll also say they got the same manager, and at this point in time, basically all the same players. So what else can you go off?
I know you want to stop short of making an actual prediction because you've got some stuff to that effect coming up on your own show. But how do you think this season's going to look for Leeds?
I can't make a prediction because George and I have to make our own individual ones and then mash ours together to create the Not the Top 20 prediction. So And I know that he will feel differently, and he would have said very different things about Leeds United if you'd got him on instead of me. We had Leeds to win the title last year, and that was led by George. He was really bullish on Leeds last year at a time where, you will remember, everyone, including all the neutrals, was going like, they look like a mess. All the players want to leave. They're shipping all these dudes out on loan, and they haven't got a good squad. George, he's got a pretty amazing brain for this stuff, and he was pretty bullish. And even though you didn't win the league or even finish second, I think he would say that he was still largely proven right in what he said at the time. So I suspect he's going to be pretty strong on Leeds. So I don't know where we'll have them in our 1-24s. It depends how our debate goes. There's always compromises that have to be made. But I expect Leeds to have just a really high floor, to come back to that phrase. I've clearly, and we have highlighted things that we don't think are as good as they could be, but that's not to take away from the fact that I can't see you guys under Farke being a poor team or an average team. I see you being a really strong team. I don't think there's going to be many surprises. I think it's a club that's showing a certain level of composure, which I think is good. Farke himself, with that strong temperament that he has, I think is a big positive. So I'd be astounded if you're not in the top 6. Within that, I won't go any further.
Up as champions then.
Playoffs again, then great stuff.
Great. But if you were offered playoffs, no, we wouldn't. No,
never take the playoffs.
No, and you shouldn't. And you shouldn't.
From our perspective,
you should be.
It's we've had too many bloody horror shows in the playoffs.
Yeah,
I know 3/4 of teams that enter the playoffs every year lose them, but it feels like we've had our share now. I've had enough of it.
Yeah, I must admit, going into it, I thought there's a chance, but then as soon as Southampton scored, I was like,
yeah, we're done here.
This familiar feeling, these comfy shoes, back on, playoff defeat, lovely stuff. Not even scoring a goal, but yeah, as Angus Kinnear once famously said, we're not dicking around with the playoffs. Let's
hope not. Thank you for coming on, Ali. Really appreciate it. And maybe we can check in again at the end of the season and see how it went and see if we were right.
Maybe. I might not be available. Depends how it's all gone.
Do you want to go on record and say who you support just as we close the show out, or is that a secret?
No, not particularly. I support not the top 20.
Congratulations on your new career as a politician. Ali, cheers. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks very much, guys.
Cheers.
The Square Ball Podcast.